Hey guys, on this episode, we're going to have Cam share a little bit of his story about stepping into real estate. We're also going to talk about faith and fear in a transaction. And then we're going to share some stories from some of the transactions that we've had that have been a little bit scary.
Yeah. Welcome to another episode of The Buzz, Real Estate and Coffee. Well, I just wanted to jump into this episode first and really be able to, so last episode we talked some about your story, kind of how you walked into deeper relationship with the Lord and in real estate. Mm-hmm. And so just really wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that. So my story actually was similar. I think I may have mentioned some of this last time, but Josh had come in. We were good buddies at that point. He had really spoken into my life some challenging things about just the testimony of what the Lord had done in his heart, and I dismissed it, completely arrogant, not open. But the Lord really started working on me, specifically with baptism. And I'd always grown up in a church where baptism was, I didn't really know what it was, right? You know, done by the preacher when you got enough people, sort of thing. And I got really challenged to go seek the scriptures about what it actually means, what it involves, the power that's in it. And basically all my boxes got blown. And it was the beginning for me of kind of saying, well, gosh, if I've been off on something like this, how much of the rest of my life has been just kind of like, well, of course I know. Do I? and really, it was a challenge in my heart of like, have I walked experientially in any of this?
Gotcha.
And it's one thing to know about. You mentioned this last time. Yeah. Right? It's another thing to know, like to know as in a friendship or a marriage. And when you know experientially, it changes everything.
Oh, totally.
It changes everything. So it really sent me on a journey because at least I thought, I looked good on the outside in a lot of ways, but I had this inherent kind of facade of seeing people for what benefit they could be to me. I guess maybe that would be a good way of summing it up. Yeah. And it was, so there was a lot of just really junk stuff, but I pushed it down. I tried to keep it secret, and so it caused me to live this one way in public, and then quietly struggle with stuff that was tearing me apart in private. And that was really had been my normal a lot of my life. And so when I met the Lord in a way where He was challenging me to actually like, are you all in? Yeah. I mean, I guess that was the first phrase. Are you all in? And my obvious answer, if I was going to be honest, was absolutely not. You know, it was like me, here's Cam, the center of Cam's universe. Cam needs, a wife and kids and friends and Jesus, like just to kind of round me out, you know. Need some finances, but it was still me in the center of the universe. So I just, I was really broken and really felt like I got to go back to first roots. I mean, that Revelation 2:4 that just hit me in the face that I've heard it my whole life. It said, you've done this and this and this and this and this. You've done all this great. However,
you have lost your first love.
Lost your first love. And actually, the Lord spoke through that verse and said, like, you never had your first love. And we were going through a really tough time in our marriage at that point, and He's like, look, you're not in love with your wife anymore, and you're not in love with me. In fact, you've never been in love with me. But you can have both of those if you're willing to humble yourself and go do whatever it takes. And so that's just been a really challenging journey. So, I mean, circling back around to you.
Oh, sure.
You were totally right. You were totally right in all of those things that night at 2 a.m. when you lovingly challenged me, and I wrote it off. But you were right on. And
it's funny because I remember, so you guys stayed at our house. It started at 2. We didn't end until 5 a.m. We got up at 7, I think, me and him. I think we had like wink of sleep. Yeah. And then we drove to the beach for a week. So I didn't talk to you the entire week. Yeah. And so we come back. I think we came back on Saturday. And that Sunday morning we came to church, and I don't remember if we actually went to church or if we just got there late. I can't remember, but I remember we were either leaving or we ran into you guys, and you're like, I got to tell you something.
Yeah, it was, but it's just it was very humbling. It was very humbling, and humble hurts. But you can choose to humble yourself, or the Lord can humble you.
Yes,
and
it's not fun when He does it.
Yeah, it's much better, much better to humble yourself. So yeah, it really led me on a journey of really constantly asking that question: Cam, are you all in? I mean, I was challenged this morning by some conversation we've gotten to have. Hey, are you all in? There's more. There's a deeper level of intimacy with the Lord that you're being invited into, and now you get the opportunity to listen and obey.
That's so good.
And if I don't listen and obey, then I'm just off in left field somewhere.
That's right.
And really the foundation of our business, but also the foundation of our parenting, the foundation of our marriages, our friendships, is this listen and obey.
That's right.
Old Testament, New Testament, it's consistent. Go listen to the Lord. Practice. It's a skill. He speaks to you out of Scripture, and He speaks to you in alignment with Scriptures through all sorts of other ways.
Oh, totally.
But it's a skill to practice hearing the voice of the Lord, and then once you hear, and you've determined, this is God.
Yeah.
Then to obey.
Yeah. Well, there's so many times, like when we were having that conversation, we were walking around in the farm with the real estate business aspects of it.
Yeah.
We were. I remember walking, and it was just like a light bulb went off. We were like, we should so do that. And I remember us praying about it, but I don't remember there being any doubt at that point. Once we had the conversation,
we knew it was right.
It was like, this is totally.
We knew it was right because it really didn't make a lot of sense in the natural.
That's right.
Like it was, I should have said, no. What if Josh doesn't hold up his end of the deal, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right? And so for us to say, no, we're just going to do this, and we're not going to basically have like a separate business that we sort of collaborate on a little bit. No, it was a high risk move.
Yeah.
And I just want to praise the Lord for that because He had that idea, and that's what's made it successful. Is really for both of us to jump all in.
Yeah.
On that.
Even when we told certain people like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Of course, there was the practicals and the wisdom and the things, hey, well, you need about this and this and this and that.
Yeah.
And we were both kind of like, well, the Lord will work that out. We listened, don't get me wrong, we did not hear them, but at the same time, it was kind of one of those things where like, the Lord told us to do it, we're just going to do it.
Right, and I don't have all the answers for
right.
it. We're still figuring some of that stuff out.
But totally.
Yeah, He told us to do it, and I don't want to wait around until it all makes sense with our reason. So,
and I think that ties into the next topic as well, is the fear and the faith piece of it.
Yeah.
Because both of us, if we are honest with ourselves, I'm sure that at times there was moments where like, there's a little bit of fear around this topic or this area or, what's going on. Because, when we joined businesses, that was one of the things that was big is I was just buying a home and in 4 months of renovations on the home, and we weren't living in the house or any of that kind of stuff. So all those things came into play. And, of course, I remember we came in the office and you said to me, I know you told me this was going to happen. However, I'm struggling with it. And I was like, I'm glad you said it because I was feeling the same thing. I was like, man, I feel like I'm taking advantage here with what's going on because like you were handling a lot of stuff and carrying some of the weight and everything else. And you said to me, you're like, we talked about this. We knew this was coming.
Yeah.
We just, now we're in it.
Yeah.
And we're gonna pray through it. We're gonna work through it, and it's gonna work out. And it was so funny how there'd be moments where I felt like I was doing absolutely nothing, and then there'd be like, oh, here's a big transaction, just falls in my lap, and like 2 weeks later closes.
Right.
So there was things that just the Lord knew. This is what you need at these particular times.
Yeah.
And it seemed like those things happened when we had those conversations where we were transparent with each other. Like, hey, this is happening, and then it was like, oh. Now I can bless your business.
Well, and we have to have times where we come into the office and we say, okay, we can't do anything until we worship the Lord, until we talk to the Lord. And it doesn't have to be some legalistic rule, but it has to be woven into our business.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, now is the time to worship and listen. Because if we're not listening, if we're not turning our eyes to the Lord, then all of a sudden it's just about, we got to make the next closing. And, we picked Image Realty Group, right? So Image, there were two verses really how we picked the word image.
Yeah.
The first, well, you talk about the first one out of Genesis.
Yeah, it came out of Genesis where he said, I created you in my image.
Yes.
And so we were like, well, if we're in his image, then we want to create a business that actually, everywhere we go, we are image bearers.
Yes.
We're bearing the image of Christ wherever we go. And so...
And we're viewing our clients as children of God as well.
Right.
Not just resources or leads or, any of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the other verse was out of Hebrews. I don't know, somewhere in the first couple of chapters, maybe chapter 1, where it says that Jesus is the express image of the Father.
That's right.
And so it's like you see Jesus, you see the heart of the Father for the world and for his children. And we really wanted to be reminded of those two anchors as we moved into a business that, let's face it, real estate is a low trust business.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trusted right down there with used car salesmen and politicians and door-to-door salesmen. It's like, how can we do this with a high level of integrity? Can it be done with a high level of integrity?
Yeah.
And I think we're getting to see that it can.
Yeah.
But there are some challenges. There's some things
sure.
that have to be sort of unwoven from the fabric of what's normal in real estate. But
I mean, we saw that with like dual agency, for instance, which is basically where we represent both sides of a transaction. And so you have, we had one transaction where Cam was the seller representative, and then I was the buyer's representative. And we're trying to protect each other's client.
Correct.
At the same time, not exposing information, not sharing things,
Right.
all the stuff.
Right.
And so I remember Cam called me and he's like, we had the highest bid that had come in. And he said, I went in and I talked to Lucas and I said, here are the offers. I'm not going to tell you whose they are.
Yes.
Which offer would you pick? So he didn't even have to make that decision.
Yeah.
In Element.
I didn't want to be
the decision.
I didn't want to be swayed.
Yes.
Because I knew that you had presented one of the strongest
That's
offers. Right. And so by doing it blind like that, and then Lucas was able to say, okay, based on this, this, and this, I would pick offer B.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, that was Josh's offer. And he's like, okay,
Yeah.
that was the double-blind placebo study to make us feel okay with that.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of hesitancy there because we want to make sure that we're protecting every client's interest. We're protecting every agent.
That's
we're
right.
protecting other clients of other agents. We're not going to be able to sleep well at night if it's not a high-integrity business.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So you mentioned something, though, about the fear and faith.
Yes.
And I'd like to expand that out a little bit
Sure.
to the market in general, because you really have two sides of looking at things.
Yeah.
Whole glass half empty, glass half full thing. But I'd like to maybe put a little bit of a different spin on it, which is you got this fear side, which is that there's always a good reason not to buy or sell.
Yeah.
Okay? And when I say the good reason, I'm talking about something in the news.
Yep.
Okay? This could be local, this could be national, could be international. Sure. But, we had the war in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. We've had inflation rising. We've had interest rates rising. Before that, we had COVID. Before that, there's always something. You can always view it from a place of fear.
Yeah.
And you can always view it from a place of, well, let me just wait until after the midterm elections. Well, let me just wait until, unemployment gets to blankety, blankety, blank. Well, let me just wait until this or this or this. And in my opinion, it's going to cause you, those are not the right questions to ask.
Yeah.
It's not that you shouldn't be asking some good hard questions. We'll talk about that in a second, but those are not the right questions to ask because there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something.
Oh, totally. And it's not a bad thing to be aware of what's going on around you either.
Certainly, yeah. But don't let that drive your decision making.
Right.
As soon as the market crashes, I can get a good deal. Mm-hmm. As soon as the war in Ukraine finally resolves, then as soon as gas prices go down, you can pick an as soon as for the next 15 years if you want to.
Oh, totally.
But rather than, so let me kind of alley-oop you into this faith discussion, because you said something really good a few minutes ago. What would be like the foundation question that you would be asking if you're looking at it from that perspective?
Sure. So I'm coming from a faith perspective. My thought process is, and I'll give you an example. So we did this when we purchased our house. The house was listed for 320. We bought it for 350, and it needed a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work. What I did, I prayed multiple times over the house, and I was like, Lord, is this the right decision for us? It feels like the right decision. It feels like everything, practically, everything lines up. And so I called my brothers. I called Cam. It was like 6, 7 guys. They all come over to the house. We walk the house. I asked the guys, I said, I want you to pray over this, and I really want you to hear the Lord. If this is for us, if it's not, I want you to really tell me that, and then I'll take that to the Lord. And so everybody came. We all walked it. We all looked at it. Nobody had any hesitations.
There were lots of practical, like,
totally.
that needs to be fixed. Ooh, that's gross, whatever. But yeah, I don't know that any of us had that whole like, Josh, this is a horrible decision. Yeah. God says no.
Yeah.
No, I think we were all walking it saying, well, gosh, this could be something great.
Yeah. And so, me and my wife, we got together and I told him, I said, if this house has us, number one, because nothing.
You mean if it's like an idol?
If it's an idol in my life, if it's something that I can't live without, if it's something that if we don't get it, we're going to be devastated. Because we did that. We had one house that we really, really liked. It had a lot more acreage, so forth, and we were like, man, and we were depressed for like a couple of days when we found out we didn't get it. And so when we went into this one, I said, we need to pray through this. Like, if this is the Lord, then it's going to work out. And so that's exactly what we did. We prayed through it. We felt peace on it. We made the offer, and it was not a crazy, ridiculous offer. I mean, it was over list, but the house was, of course, undervalued.
Oh, you had tons of offers on it. There were tons of over list offers on it. Yeah,
there was, I think, 15 offers on the house. Yeah. We're $30,000 over list, but we had some benefits because I was an agent and there was commissions and things like that. So there were some things that were beneficial.
But you're
to
saying
us.
You took that to the Lord, and you were okay with Him saying no.
That's right.
Yeah.
Is this the house? Is this not the house? And so when we had peace on it, we both prayed on it, and I said, Em, do you feel like this is the house for us? And she said yes. And I said, okay. And I'll tell you, my wife was not okay with that house. And when we first walked in, she was like, absolutely not, I'm not buying this house. But then once we saw the potential, we had people look at it. I mean, I had multiple contractors look at it, multiple painters. I had to go through the gamut, if you will. But we did our practical, if you will, research on it. Then we took it to the Lord. And when we did, literally, the agent, we put our offer in, and I think they had a deadline, if I recall. And literally that next day, we got a phone call. I was at my parents' house, and they're like, hey, we accept your offer. And we're like, me and my wife got a lady, like, did we really just get a house?
Wow.
We just bought a house.
Yeah.
And so needless to say, it was a big undertaking, but the Lord used that house, and He still uses that house to this day. He brought people into the house that we hadn't spent a lot of time with, didn't know very well, but they came in, they helped paint, they helped rip out floors, they helped rip out carpet. There were so many things, and there was constantly people showing up at the house, coming by, asking what they could do to help, donating time, donating, work, paint, whatever.
Trailers, all sorts of things.
All kinds of stuff. Yeah. So I saw the Lord use it as a resource or a tool to be able to bring the gospel forward in a much bigger way. And so, that was the beauty of it, right? So the other house, I have no idea what the Lord would have done with that. He taught me a lot through it. We made an offer on the house and we didn't get it. He told me very specifically, just to kind of give you a backstory, when we looked at the first house, both me and my wife prayed into it, and the Lord told me a specific day. He told me on Christmas Day I was supposed to send the offer. I'd written the offer, signed the offer 2 weeks in advance. We waited 2 weeks. House was still available on Christmas Day. We sent our offer over. Of course, they did not accept the offer, but the Lord told me, He said, Josh, I want you to obey. Whatever I tell you to do, I want you to obey. And I'm like, there's no way. I mean, we were like $100,000 under list price on this offer and all this stuff. And I was like, there's no way it's going to work. But I'm like, Lord, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. Yep. So we made the offer. And of course they came back and they're like, laughable. No, but it was the Lord showing me, Josh, are you going to obey me? Are you going to walk us out in faith? You're going to do what I've said? I mean, we talked to the agent for 2 or 2.5 weeks prior, just setting the tone. Hey, this is what we feel. And I got to share that with that agent as well. Hey, this is what I feel like the Lord's telling me to do. And so the Lord used all of those things just because we were willing to be obedient.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's awesome. And so So when you're talking about ask the Lord,
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned you didn't just kick all the practicals out.
Yeah.
Right. So like we can line both of those up together.
Totally.
We can be able to say, how is your financial picture?
That's right.
What do you have income? Do you have income history? Do you feel like your job is pretty stable for the moment?
Yeah.
How is your savings? How is your debt?
Yeah.
How is adding a mortgage going to affect your monthly payments and your budget and all of that? So it doesn't mean that you don't ask some of those questions, and obviously you want to be crystal clear on your why.
That's right.
If you're a first-time home buyer, why do we want to own instead of rent?
Yeah.
What are the specific advantages there?
Yeah.
If you're already in a house, what about this house doesn't work? Is this something that we could just tweak our current house and stay in? Because you're gonna have every realtor wants you to sell the house because they make money. They don't make money. They don't make money when you remodel and stay.
Yeah.
But it's a very real question, and really, I want us to just challenge ourselves to be, as we're talking with clients. Hey, before you sell this house, is there a way that you could remodel this house and it would fit what you're looking for?
That's right.
Without having to sell. Selling is stressful and it's hard and it's expensive. And so really, if you're going to have an advocate, if you're going to have a guide and a teacher instead of just somebody who's trying to get your money, that's a great question for them to be asking.
Yeah.
Is, all right, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, why don't you like this house, and is it something that's fixable? And then if it's not something that cannot be adjusted with the house or the location or the area or the whatever, then okay, you have a legitimate reason to sell. Don't wait for all the news to be all goody two shoes news. Okay, that's never going to be all good news.
Yeah.
And so now, are you in a financial position to sell?
That's right.
What is your equity situation? That's where you might need to reach out to a real estate agent and be able to say, hey, run some comparable homes. Let me know what this thing is worth based on what I owe on it. So there's nothing wrong with doing all of that, but all of that is built on the foundation of, Lord, we're submitting this to you.
That's right.
What do you want us to do?
Yeah.
Because common sense is common sense. Faith trumps common sense.
That's right.
And there have been times, and we know people personally, they made a decision because they felt the Lord told them to do it, and it was not financially savvy.
Oh yeah, it was not the wise decision.
It was not what would be the wise decision, just in your common sense thinking. And of course, the Lord leads us to do those things. So I really wanted to communicate to our folks listening or watching the podcast is just, there are two perspectives. Don't be ruled by this fear perspective of all these things that are out of your, I will say out of your control. I mean, you use the term, the illusion of control.
That's right.
You could always lose your job tomorrow. You
That's
could
right.
always get in a debilitating car accident tomorrow. Okay, you can't control those things, but you really can't control wars and inflation and all these things.
Yes.
And those are always going to be there.
That's
okay,
right.
they're always going to. It's just going to be a different thing tomorrow.
Yep.
Don't let that ruler run your decision making. Really look at, what do I feel like the Lord's wanting me to do? Is there a reason why I need to make a legitimate reasons why I need to make a transaction, a buy or a sell? And then what does my financial picture look like that would allow me to have some practicals of like, yes, now's a good time, or I need to wait 6 months. I got to get that debt paid off, and I need to get that savings up to this amount. So there's some practicals there, but let it be on the foundation of, this is what I feel like the Lord's telling us to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's totally good. Well, second transition.
Yeah.
Kind of give you guys a cool story. As I said, we've been in real estate for a while. Yeah. And we've had some kind of crazy, scary stories, if you will. One of mine was I had these clients that it was my second transaction ever. And so I'm freaking out. My first transaction was like, didn't have a hitch, right? Perfect transaction, nothing happened, nothing came up. It was like, wow, this was great. Second transaction, I'm like, all right, cool, it's going to be the same way. Yeah, but it wasn't.
It's like having your second kid.
That's exactly right.
Second kid will be just like the first kid. Yeah.
So we go to this house. It needed some work and things like that. We were able to get a pretty good, I think we got like $3,000 or $5,000 in closing costs. Now
this is before the market got
white hot. This was beginning of getting into real estate.
Yeah.
And so we put, I think we did like $500 or $600 in due diligence.
Wow.
Maybe
I haven't seen that in a while.
$500 in earnest, something like that.
Yeah.
Wasn't much. We were like $2,000 under list with $5,000, I think, in closing costs.
Yeah.
And so we're like, man, this is amazing. We got a really good deal on this. And so go under contract, all the things are happening, whatever. And everything goes smooth. I mean, we do our inspections, got appraisal, all the loan stuff, and we get a phone call from the attorney. The attorney's like, hey, I got some bad news. And we're like, what do you mean? We're closing like tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
No way.
We're like, what do you mean? Yeah. And she says, well, there's about $150,000 worth of tax liens on this house.
Oh, my word. And
the house, even if it sells at max price, it will not cover all the tax liens because they still owed money on the house. And so
pause a second. That would mean that technically the seller
yes.
is responsible for the tax liens.
That's right.
But they can also just say, I don't have the money for it, and then the whole transaction falls apart.
Yes.
So if your buyer wants it, they may have to go do something about it.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
And so there's no way for us as real estate agents to know that kind of information. That's something that the attorney's going to pull title work. And
that's the title search.
Yes.
That's in North Carolina, we're an attorney state. Sometimes there's a title company state in other areas of the country, but we're an attorney state, so it's going to be a real estate attorney running those title searches fairly close to closing. Maybe not the day before, but it's fairly close to closing. Yeah.
It's typically about a week or so before, maybe 2 weeks in some cases, about 2 weeks before close. They're going to start that process. They normally get it back in about a week, and so. But this one she had been looking into it and finding out, and it wasn't like there was just one lien. It was like a collaborative of liens.
So it was a whole web.
It was a whole web, and so she was like finding all of them so she could figure out how much the amount was going to be. And so we're sitting there, we're like, holy crap, this is not good. And I don't know what to do. I mean, this is my second transaction.
Right.
Of course, and so I contact my client, and I'm like, look, I said, attorney's calling me, telling me this, and this, and they're like, well, what do we do? And I'm like, well, I said, honestly, what should happen is everything you've paid for and everything you've done, your inspection, your appraisal, your due diligence, and your earnest, all of that should come back to you from the seller's expense, right? Because they defaulted on contract, not us.
Right.
And so contact the listing agent.
Part of a contract in the state of North Carolina is that they give you a clean title.
That's right.
Free of all liens like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the seller breached contract.
That's right.
Which means you can legally back out.
That's right. And so, of course, you have first option, which is they, of course, refund us any of our fees. Second is you take them to small claims court. And so we had enough that it hurt, but we didn't have enough that it was like worth our time to go through that whole process. Yeah. And even if we had went through small claims, it would have just been placing not a lien, but what's the word?
Oh, I'm not even sure once you jump into that legal world.
Yeah. So you basically you place something on their file, the credit file.
Okay.
A judgment. That's the word. So you would place a judgment on them. And that's really all it is. And so if they ever sell a house, then of course that judgment then comes up and they have to pay that out and whatever. But so eventually you might get your money, maybe. But you have to reapply that judgment every 15 years and so forth. So it's really not worth the time in most cases, unless it's a large amount of money. But so we went to the seller and we said, look, or went to the listing agent and said, you've breached contract, you need to pay us back for these things. And so we sent him all the invoices and everything else. He gave us the due diligence back. That was it. And so we got stiffed for like $1,500.
Wow.
And so the whole time, listing agent is very workable. Like she's talking and she's communicating and all that. But she just telling me, she's like, he's not going to pay it. And I'm like, what do I do? Right? So I contact my buyers. I'm like, here's our options. They're like, we're not going to sue. This is not worth it, and so forth.
You spend $1,500 in like that with attorney fees.
Oh, and totally. And so basically what ended up happening is they had already moved out of their apartment. They were ready to move into this house. The whole thing, it was a big mess. They moved in with their grandparents.
Okay.
And it ended up kind of being a blessing in disguise because they moved in with the grandparents. The grandparent didn't charge them rent or anything like that. So they were able to stack up some extra cash and put us in a little bit better financial picture.
Did they end up buying?
We did. So they were my next transaction.
Okay.
And so number 3 of 2,
Number 2 and 3.
We ended up buying them a house,
Okay.
and everything went smooth on that one, closed out and all of that.
Wow.
And but yeah, it was a scary moment for a newbie real estate agent.
Yeah. Oh, so that's crazy. I never had a tax lien situation on a house like that, especially something like that, 150 grand. That's huge.
It was intense.
Yeah, well, my story is not anywhere close to that exciting, but it was really more of just a kind of a marathon story.
Yeah.
So I had a client a couple of years ago, Western North Carolina. They were both about to retire, but at a little bit different times. They had a house to sell up there. There were some complications, but they were about to have their first grandchild here. And so they had a lot of motivation to get down here. But it was 2.5 years
Oh, wow.
of every few months, hey, can we see these 3 homes? Okay, good. We go out and look for these 3 homes. And they kept telling me, we are going to buy. But I had my moments for sure. I was thinking like, wow, is this going to be my whole career, showing these clients homes? There was one particular neighborhood. I think we looked at between 15 and 20 homes in that one neighborhood by itself. And so patience paid off because it was my largest transaction when it finally did get closed. It was over $500,000. And they got a great house, phenomenal house, and they were very happy. And so it turned out really well. But I would just encourage any young agents who might be listening to the podcast, this is a long game. It's a patience game. And you could very easily be in a situation like that. And just don't give up. Just keep honoring, keep serving, keep walking with integrity. Don't blow the person off. Yeah. If they have the ability to buy and they have the motivation to buy, then let it roll. And so, yeah.
That's awesome. I remember you telling me one time there was the lady, she never bought a house, but she sent you like 3 referrals or something.
Oh, yeah. It was my very first client. Yeah. And with her, that really wasn't. That was green. I think we looked at 30 homes.
Oh, man.
She still has, to this day, as of a few months ago, not purchased a home. Yeah, that was 6 years. But she had somebody in her church that ended up. Yeah, it was a very successful overall. But man, it felt frustrating there in the moment. So anyway.
Oh man.
Yep.
That's good.
Yep.
Well, guys, we thank you guys for just checking out this podcast. We have had a good time just kind of cutting up with you, telling you some stories, sharing just a little bit of our faith with you. But if you can, leave us some comments, ask some questions. Anything you guys want to know about or hear about in the podcast, please put those in the comments below. Like and share this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel or Facebook or any of the other elements. And we'll see you guys in the next video.
See ya.